Okay, welcome everyone to the blog of drjeanneporterking.com. And I want to welcome you today as we close out our series on anti-racism. We did a blog series of books and videos and just ideas around anti-racism. And this summer, I had an intern, Keandria Coward. I'll have her introduce herself in a moment. And she managed the blog along with help from her sister, who's a previous intern. And we had our youngest writer, Taylor Porter, also contribute. So we're going to start, first of all, with some introductions. I'm going to ask each of them to give their name and just a little bit about them and who they are and why writing for JeannePorterKing.com this summer was attractive for them. Who wants to start out?
I'll start. My name's Keandria, and I go to California University of PA, and I'm a junior this year. And for me, I enjoyed writing for the blog because it opened up a lot of my thoughts in Black history and civil rights. So I thought it was interesting to experience new education.
Awesome, awesome. Kristen, why don't we stay on that frame and let's hear from you.
Yeah, sure. My name is Kristen Court, and I'm a communication specialist in the corporate America. So for me, I think it was really cool to write on the blog. I think right now our country's facing a very contentious time as it relates to race matters. So just kind of getting my thoughts and my feelings out there and having my voice be heard and having the blog be an outlet for that was so wonderful. And then just being introduced to, throughout the whole series, all the different books that are available for us to just continue to learn about the issues that Black people face in society, the everyday issues. So it was helpful for me.
Awesome. And what was delightful for me is for the first part of the series, you mentored your sister, who was our intern, but you mentored her by editing the first few blogs, teaching her about editing and uploading to the blog. And then by the end of it, she was editing you. And I thought that was so cute.
Yeah.
I know, right? And Taylor, tell us about you.
Hi, I'm Taylor. I go to CSG and I'm a junior and I'm on their volleyball team. And writing this summer for the project was really cool. I'd never done a big project like that before, so it was fun to experience writing and researching a topic I knew about and got to experience a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
It was good to also get my thoughts out and share my story at my school.
Awesome, awesome. Well, I thank all three of you for participating. Let me dive into the questions. The reason we started the blog on anti-racism was that since May 25th and the death of George Floyd, the nation had seen calls for racial justice in the form of protests and prayer vigils. And this was our way of contributing. Let's just talk broadly for a moment. How has this movement for racial equality affected each of you?
Oh, you can go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say for me, you start off and you feel hurt just seeing another Black man die at the hands of a white police officer. So you feel hurt and you feel angry that this keeps happening. And then you start to feel, you don't want to feel this way. But for me, I started to feel helpless because I'm like, what can I do to create change? And then, so all these feelings are kind of circling my mind. And I think, again, that's why this project was great, because I got to learn more about it and I got to kind of put my thoughts down on paper and to express myself.
Yeah, and it didn't help that we were going through all of this in the midst of a global pandemic either, right? So there was already a lot of stress. How about you, Taylor? What did this moment call for racial justice? What has it meant for you?
For me, it was this time made it a lot easier for me to educate some of the people I know that doesn't believe that police brutality is a thing or that it doesn't affect a lot of people. And this just gave me a lot of examples to share with my friends or just my peers that it is a big thing that happens and it's not fair. And then it also gave me a time to use different skills that I have to show my support for the Black families out there, but then also share my voice and let my voice be heard.
What do you think was different this time for your friends that didn't think it was a thing? What do you think it was because Mr. Floyd died so brutally and so visibly in front of the world? I mean, the video captured it and people couldn't deny what happened. Is that what you think changed the minds of your white friends at school perhaps?
Yeah, I think it did. Because I do have friends that believed that it was like a thing and that it needed to be stopped. But I think with the George Floyd's death being broadcasted and showed, that it's a clear representation of this is what happens and this is a thing and it needs to be stopped.
Yeah, yeah. And what about you, Keandria? What has this moment meant for you?
Kind of along the lines of Taylor, because I feel like I've always been talked about civil rights and activism. So for me, it was like people are finally becoming aware of all the injustices, and I can help educate them and educate myself with everything that I've read this summer. So it's just kind of like more people are coming together to help stop it for me.
Awesome, awesome. Well, thank you again for contributing to our anti-racism series. Let's talk a little bit about the writing series, research part of the series. How was the experience for you to research and write on a topic related to anti-racism or social justice? Talk to me about just the experience. Start with you, Keandra, since you really were the manager of the blog and you read a number of books and reviewed videos. So just talk to me about that experience.
For me, it was really fun because my minor is African American Studies at Cal, so there's only so much at college you can fit into a semester, and my professors do a really good job of it. But after I read the books and continued to educate myself, it was like the history was coming together even more, and there wasn't as many holes left out that you have to unfortunately skip. So for me, it was like I was engaged in reading it because I wanted to know more about it. So it was really fulfilling for me.
Oh, awesome, awesome. What about the other two of you guys, about the process of getting your ideas out and sharing your point of view? When you think about it, that's really about claiming your voice, sharing your voice. You hear a lot about women and our voice. So in this way, this platform provided you a place for your voice to be heard. Taylor, talk to me a little bit about how getting your voice heard, how did that feel for you this summer?
It was different because, like I said before, I'd never done something like this before, but it actually was really cool. When my article got posted, I got a lot of responses, and they were all positive, and it was like this. They were all saying along the lines like, "This is really good," or I experienced the same thing, and it's sad that she has to go through the same thing, but I'm glad she's trying to make a change. Or it was just really eye-opening.
Yeah, you did get a lot of great responses. How do you think you might use your voice moving forward?
Well, at my school, we have a club, which is called Beauty of African American Culture Club. And I will share my story and use my voice in that club and in all the different events that we hold throughout the year. And I'm hoping to play a part in our assembly that we do in Black History Month. And I'm hoping it'll be about anti-racism and social justice. And if it is, I would like to play a bigger role in that with sharing my story.
Awesome, awesome. So you let us know how we can help and support you in playing that role. So awesome. Kristen, talk to me. How in, again, editing this series, starting out editing, mentoring Keandria, and then writing your own. How did it feel empowering to get your ideas out?
Yeah, it felt good. I think like I was reading all of the blogs and I was editing Keandre's, so I was learning as I was doing that process. And then for reading the book, I read the memo by Minda Harts, and it's about how women in the workplace, women of color, have to navigate the corporate culture. And for me, I was reading and I was like, yeah, yeah. It was kind of like nodding my head the whole time, like, yeah, I know what you mean. Like, I get that. So it was really a lot of confirmation to me that, you know, the things that I have been experiencing as a Black woman aren't like made up things in my head, and that other women of color have these experiences as well. So, you know, and just me being able to write about that book and also share some of my experiences was great.
Yeah, I loved how you intertwined your own experiences into the 5 lessons that you pulled away, or pulled from Minda's Hart's book. And I would, at this point, put a little plug into the people who are viewing this vlog. If you go to our blog, JeannePorterKing.com, you can read all of the articles that were written by these wonderful ladies. And then for you, Keandria, how do you think you might, first of all, how was this experience empowering for you?
It kind of made me um, love being Black even more, like embrace it all, because I was learning about my history. So it just made me want to go in deeper to it and learn more.
Yeah, and you are an African American Studies minor with a communication major. So I could see you doing a lot more in the future, which leads to the next one. How do you see yourself using your voice moving forward?
Well, at college, we have a BSU, a Black Student Union. So for me, it would be like asking my coaches to maybe choose better practice time so me and the other Black girls on the team can go to that and support them more.
Mm-hmm.
And it would be like, if I see people needing help and understanding like acts of racism and like Black history, I can help educate them at college in like a nice and healthy demeanor, and not like aggressively as some people tend to take it. So I can help educate them nicely and use my voice there too.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Taylor writes about this, and I'll come back over to her in a minute. But this idea that as Black women, again, admittedly, this is my auntie or auntie mentoring moment for you all. Yeah, if we are outspoken and we are assertive in our views, we can get labeled as aggressive. And we'll have Taylor talk about that a little bit from her perspective on the book. And the reality is we should be able to give feedback and share, especially when things affect us. So we'll talk a little more about that whole double bind and the stereotypes that we as Black women face, and you and each of your generations, from young adult, professional, college student, and high school. So let's dive into that a little bit. Taylor, you write about relating to Star in the book, The Hate You Give. You noted that there are times in your private, predominantly white high school that you feel you have to change how you show up to fit into the culture there. Talk a little more about that. I know you wrote about it, but just talk about that a little bit more.
Yeah. So at my school, I have like my Black friends that I hang out with a lot. And then I also have like my white friends, and then also my peers that are mostly white also. So I tend to act more like confident and fun in myself around my Black friends and talk. And I tend to have to like, when I'm with my white friends, I tend to have to like flip a switch almost and figure out who I am, and then choose a different version where I'm more quiet or just a little bit more tame, I guess. Or
And why do you think that is?
I honestly, I'm not that sure. It's just, I feel like I'm a little bit more comfortable around my Black friends on the situation I'm in.
Mm-hmm.
And at times it's hard, but I've learned from reading this book and writing about it that I don't have to do that. I can just be myself whenever. And I tried that during my club volleyball season, and it turned out really well. So
Okay. Well, sometimes I wonder, because I went to a predominantly white high school, junior high and high school. And I wonder sometimes if it's we learn more about the predominant culture and we know how to flex in between. But oftentimes, white kids don't know as much about our culture and therefore make judgments about it. So, what do you want your white students at your school to know about your experience as a Black young woman at your girls' school?
I think I just want like from them to learn from not just my story, but other of my peers or my friends' stories that went through similar things that I did. Like one of my friends had to to embrace her blackness a lot more, and it's empowered me a lot. So I think I just want them to learn and to be like, and not to judge and just to be open like we are.
Like we are with their culture. Yes. Good. What's one thing you might ask of your white friends at school to create a more inclusive culture at your school? What's one thing you might ask them?
I think it's honestly to ask questions, because I know a lot of times they have questions and they don't want to ask, or they just won't ask. So I think it'll open a better conversation if they just ask.
Awesome, awesome. And I would encourage you to encourage them also to listen when they ask the question, to be open to listen without judgment. So that's awesome, Taylor. Thank you. Thank you. Kristen, you already talked about, you wrote about the memo, What Women of Color Need to Know to Gain a Seat at the Table by Minda Harts. Your 5 lessons were very insightful. Is there anything that, again, to encourage our listeners to go to the blog and read it? Is there one of those lessons that you can share with us right now to encourage them to go read the book? I mean, to read your blog and then the book.
Yeah. Um, wow, there were like a lot of lessons. It really was like a handbook with tips and tricks and all in one place. Because some of it you kind of figure out as you go, but it's nice to have it down on paper. Um, but one that stood out for me was probably negotiate what you're worth. I think for me, and the author speaks about the wage gap with women and women of color. And I think for me, like I've always been very uncomfortable talking about that with employers, and I kind of try and dance around it. Or sometimes I'm just like, I'm just happy to have a job, and I'm just happy to, and I don't really think about it as, I'm experienced, and I'm good at what I do, and an employer would be happy to have me. So I think just articulating what my desires are, and also something that really stood out was talking about your salary with your friends, because that's something that me and my best friend for 10 years has never done, and until recently. And it's just an eye opener, and to hear what other people are making so that you know what the competitive wages are.
Ah, okay. It sounds like Minda Harts went through a lot herself and then wrote this book to help other women of color, especially Black women, navigate some of the landmines that are out there in corporate America. You also mentioned, I love the way you started. Well, there's 2 things. I loved your writing style because you write like a millennial. When you, I guess the one woman said something about there were no colored people in her hometown. And you said, I bet there aren't any colored people in your hometown.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, I mentioned also that when I was put in that situation, it's my first job, and I'm not quite sure what to say or what to say about that, because, as a Black woman, sometimes we don't want to address those things because we come across as, playing the racist card or being too aggressive, so I kind of ignore a lot of those things. But I think we should all make those teachable moments and say, we're referred to as Black people or people of color today, and we don't like to be called colored people, just so that the next person doesn't have to experience that. So
Yeah, I thought that was good. But you also said, nobody told you about that the workplace would be full of office politics, or that your experiences as a Black woman would be so different than the experiences of white women. And that really intrigued me. I'm thinking for your Aunt Tamara, for myself, we've been in the workplace for so long, and we either never explicitly said that to you, or you picked it up on your own. That kind of really touched me, that we may have to do a better job of preparing young women like yourselves for the amount of office politics.
There were a lot of politics and office politics, that I had to learn on the go. But I think you and Aunt Tamara have been, when I'm going through those situations, I can talk to you about it, and you've given me great advice on how to manage some of those. And I remember specifically on my first job, the first day of my first job, I had changed my hairstyle and I had just taken my braids out. And other black women probably know, when you first take those braids out, your hair is really kinky, and you can try and do whatever you want with it, but your hair is really just going to do its thing. And so that was my experience. And then I remember I went to work with my natural hair and my puff, my little puff, and I couldn't do anything with my hair. And I remember calling Aunt Tamara, and I'm like, Aunt Tamara, I think I just need to take a sick day, and I need to go to the hairdresser, and I need to just get my hair done. And she's just like, no, you grab a headband, you pull it back, and you go into the office. So yeah, I think, I've definitely been fortunate to have my aunts
And your mother, and your
mother,
three working women, right?
yeah.
But what I love is we are evolving in the professional arena around our hair. That is still such a big thing for Black women. Is this professional? Is this not professional? And we're evolving so much so that the Crown Act, which was an act that said workplaces could not discriminate against Black women or Black people for wearing our natural styles. Where but in America did we need a law that permitted us to wear our hair the way it grows out of our head? That lets you know about the entrenched racism. And again, this series was designed at looking at the nuances of anti-racism. One more thing before I go to Keandra. You went to a private university also that was predominantly white. But what struck me about your experience is you came out with a very diverse set of friends. And for me, our goals around anti-racism really is to create this respect for diversity and create an inclusive culture wherever we are, workplace, church, home, but America. So talk to us a little bit about your experience of diversity and inclusion at Capital University.
Yeah, so I've always loved learning about other cultures. And so I'm from a small town where there are a lot of white people. And so going to college and I've always gravitated towards different people. And so my best friend, she's Ethiopian. My other good friend is Mexican, and I have another friend who's Indian. So and I love it because it's been great to hear about, different foods and different celebrations, but also that we each face our own types of issues. And it really is eye-opening for me to see what other cultures, experience and what they go through. And then for us to just be able to come together and we pick up small things from each other. I always share with people the time we had Thanksgiving, and it was our Friendsgiving, and someone brought turkey, someone brought tacos, someone, we were bringing all different foods from our culture, and it ended up being really nice. So it's just been a great experience.
Yeah, I think that's one of our goals, at least for me with JeannePorterKing.com and my company Transporter Group, is to develop more inclusive experiences, respect for diversity, and to develop and mentor young women to be able to lead that charge. Which leads me to you, Keandra. You reviewed 3 books, I believe it was, for our series, in addition to writing an independent piece on your research around colorism. Which of the books, let's start with that, which one of the books impacted you the most and why?
I'd have to say the first book I read, Stamped, because it was such a informational book, and I learned a lot by reading it. And it was like the author wrote it like it was a conversational book, so like I felt like he was just talking straight to me. And after I read that, my views about a lot of things just changed and shifted into anti-racism because I had never heard of the term before. So after learning about what it was like we need to strive to be anti-racist. So it was interesting.
And on that note, you know, to be honest with you, I did my doctorate 20 something years ago, and I did communication and culture and did a lot of work around race and gender. And up until the last maybe 2 years ago, it was a fairly new term for me also. And so what I love about Ibram X. Kendi, who wrote the original book, Stamped from the Beginning, which is a very deep historical book, and then the version you read was adapted for young adults and made more accessible. What I love is his argument that you'll have people who say, I'm not racist, but if they're not actively trying to fight racism, then not racist is not the opposite of anti. And that was such a good point, that if you're not actively working against racist systems, then not racist is not enough. We have to be anti-racist. Taylor, before I go back to Keandra, what about anti-racism? Was that a new term for you, or do you all already getting that in your school curriculum?
It was new. I'd heard of it. It's not taught at my school really. Like I say, my history teacher did a really good job of when we talked about the civil rights movement and segregation and stuff, because there were certain people in my class that I had that asked certain questions, but she explained it very well, so I was thankful for that. But yeah, it's a new term for me too.
Yeah, well, we got it now, right? So Stamped was one that made a lot of impact for you, and really sounds like it gave you some frameworks and language even to apply what you've been getting in your African American history courses to today, right?
Yeah. Yes.
What's one takeaway from the book you might share with us?
Mine would be, you kind of go through it, and it was an emotional ride for a book, kind of, because it goes from the beginning before slavery even happened in America, and then it kind of goes through it all, and he continues to remind you that the same fight was being fought, and like we still weren't being heard. So he tells you this, and you just have to remind yourself, like, we're still fighting this fight now. So it's interesting to read it now during the movement that's happening and realizing, like, this is past history, but we're still fighting for it. So that was kind of my biggest takeaway. It was like to like put down the book for a couple minutes and then pick up my phone and see civil rights happening like in real life. So it put a lot of things into perspective for me.
Awesome, awesome. And you know what's a little sad for me, the three of you, your grandfather was a big civil rights proponent in the small towns that we grew up in. You know, you had the big civil rights movement with Dr. Martin Luther King and the, Southern Christian Leadership Conference. But in our small area, even before I was born or when I was really, really little, my dad, your grandfather, fought for the rights for the stores in the community to hire Black kids. Black kids weren't able to get those jobs. Once he moved into corporate management, he made ways for young people of color, Black young men and women to get jobs. And what's sad is that we're still seeing that fight for civil rights, employment equity, voting rights, economic equity. We're still fighting for that. And what I appreciated about what you're saying is that very idea that Blacks were less than was stamped into the very beginning of this country. And so when people talk about, this country and its founding, we have a different perspective on it, don't we?
Yes.
Yeah. Tell us something else about any of the, so that was the book that impacted you most. Anything else that you would share with our readers about the blog that you'd want them to really go check out?
I also would say I'm Still Here, Black Dignity in a World Made for Whiteness. That book was really good, in my opinion, because the author wrote on her experiences being a Black woman in America and in predominantly white towns and neighborhoods, and having to go between a white town and a Black town. So she had to code switch, and she didn't know kind of Black culture. So it was hard for her to kind of figure it out. So for me, it was like I grew up in a white town and went to a white school, and then I got to college and I was around all these Black people, and it was like kind of like a reverse culture shock. And I was like, wow, like I've never been around this many people of my culture, except for like my family and friends in East Liverpool. But it was kind of shocking, and it took like a little bit of thinking for me to realize, like, you know, like this is my culture, like it's okay to be immersed in it, I guess.
Yeah. That, again, the experiences are that we learn about the, white culture. We're immersed in it. It's a part of where many of us have grown up. Not everyone watching this, some have are blessed to be in all Black communities or in very multicultural communities. But it struck me when you began to tell me about your school and how diverse it was and the large population of Black students. It's right outside of Pittsburgh, right? Yeah. And that was amazing to me. And it was very kind of fulfilling for you, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
it was.
Yeah, I guess that's a blessing to have something close to home for you to go to. Had you ever considered going to an HBCU, or any of the three of you considered going to an HBCU college?
Yeah, I have for graduate school, perhaps. Yeah.
Yeah, one thing I know is a blessing for you. You are on full scholarship for playing volleyball. You're on the volleyball team. So sometimes we do, as Black women, make choices that are in our best economic interest. But I love the idea that you would consider it for graduate school. Okay, Taylor, any ideas about college yet for you?
A little bit. I'm still looking at it because I have a little bit of time. But I looked at ASU, and I'm also trying to look at some HBCUs. So.
Okay, well, you'll keep us posted. Anything you thinking about majoring in? Because you're going into your junior year, so you don't have a lot of time. This is the year we need to make those decisions. So
yeah, we're doing a lot of things. Yeah, we're doing a lot of things to figure it out. I know I want a minor in something that's to do with art, but I'm not sure what I want to major in, but I'm still trying to figure it out.
Okay, that's right. We'll be in prayer with you on that. You might follow your cousins and go into communication, right? Like all of them. Okay, so let's get a little more personal. What are your dreams and hopes for an anti-racist school or workplace? So what are your dreams and hopes for an anti-racist school or workplace? Who wants to start?
I will. For me, it would be for an anti-racist school. It would kind of be not to treat the Black kids different from the white kids, and be treated as a student, and just a student, like base it on just being yourself, and to not kind of make the school a jail for Black kids. I feel like oftentimes if you're in certain situations in school, it's based mainly on skin color and race. Then the then the punishment is bigger or less depending on it.
Have you seen that happen? Do you saw that happen? What, in high school? Tell me, can you think of an example or some examples?
Yeah, a couple. I think it was my senior year. There was a girl who was found with illegal substances in her car, and she was white. And she said it was her brother's and everything was fine, and they kind of just waved it off and were like, okay, it's fine. And it happened to a Black kid, and instead he was suspended from school for 90 days. He came back, he got his book bag searched. he was searched in school. And that's only one example. I remember I was in the lunchroom and a police officer actually, it was me and my group of friends who were Black, and my cousin got up to throw away his lunch tray and something else was happening in the lunchroom. And the police officer was like, hey, sit down. And my cousin was like, oh, I'm just throwing away my lunch tray. And he like put his hands on his belt and was like, hey, kid, I told you to sit down now. You sit down now and I tell you. And like, they all looked up and I was like, everyone just sit down, because like worst comes to worst, you don't want it to. So I don't feel that shouldn't happen in high schools based on skin color, because there were other white kids getting up to throw away their trays also.
Wow. So that discrimination, that treating Black kids differently. And you brought up something there's two things that I'm hearing. One is there's a term called adultification, that often the broader society looks at our kids as adults, like poor Tamir Rice got shot, relishing, brandishing a toy gun. The officer pulls up, shoots, thinking he was an adult. This is a 12-year-old boy. He looked like an adult, really? And so I hear the same thing that you're describing, is this police treating this young guy like an adult, number one, so this adultification, but also this bias based on race and skin color. The white kids are getting up, or you give the white girl a softer or no sentence or ramifications, but the guy gets 90 days suspension. Isn't that the whole school year practically?
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, so just that differential treatment, that there's bias in the system, and the leaders sometimes don't even own up to how they've treated it differently. So I do appreciate that. And so for you, an anti-racist school would be one in which the Black kids are not treated differently, and they're given the same benefit of the doubt, and they are treated as the young people that they are and not adults. Awesome, awesome. Anyone else want to jump in there? What would be your vision, hopes, and dreams for an anti-racist school or workplace?
I think for an anti-racist workplace, I think like you mentioned, there are a lot of racist bias. So just making sure people are treated equally, making sure people are paid what they're doing, paid accordingly. And also I think with Black women in the workplace, it's sometimes they struggle to connect with others and to find those mentors and those sponsors, and just to be developed. You know, I think sometimes, like for me, like I'm a very private person and I don't want to open up about everything because I can't always relate to the stories of my peers, and I don't want to be judged. And I think sometimes it's hard for other white leaders to really take those Black women underneath their wing and to develop them into leaders in the organization.
Yeah. So. That's insightful. I appreciate it, especially as we do a lot of work. As you know, in my company, you've helped with a number of projects that we've had. Is I'm committed to helping to develop young women and women as a whole as leaders. But sometimes that movement for gender equality is not intersectional. Black women don't get the same treatment or strides as white women. And white women have really benefited from a lot of the diversity movement, but Black women not always. So we are affected by racism and sexism. And then when you overlay other things, you know, you could also add more to it. And sometimes I think to have an anti-racist workplace, even if you just look at women's development, we really have to help white women work more towards that equality within the gender movement. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Yeah, I know that's what I have seen, and I'm trying to work with it. And we'll talk about what we want in allies in a moment. Taylor, what about you? What's your vision, hope, and dream for an anti-racist school?
I think it'd be kind of like what Keandre said, not to be treated differently, but I also think it's welcoming a lot more people of color, or even just Black students, and then also teachers and representatives in higher power at my school or just in schools in general.
But at your school, yeah, and what I appreciate about it really connects even with what Kristen was saying and what Keandra is saying. There's one thing for individuals, and we'll talk about in a moment what you would like to have a closing thought for your friends, colleagues. So there's one thing to help individuals not be anti-racist, but there's another thing for us to look at our systems and our structures and our processes in the school or in the workplace and make sure they're not racist. So when you look at your point about more representation of teachers and administrators and leaders of color. In the workplace, are our talent acquisition processes fair so that we have the opportunity to hire more Blacks, people of color? How about when we are giving job assignments? Do managers give it to their people who are like them, you know, other white managers or co-workers that they have good relationships with? Do they leave out the Blacks to get the experiences they need? Or when we look at advancement and succession planning, do we have those processes in place that allow us to really give fairness on all levels? So yeah, that's interesting. Which leads me to, let me just real quickly, Keandra, what about for you around sports and athletics? What are some things, you were telling me about some good things that were happening at your school with the athletics, and so many of the students, student athletes are students of color, but there's some things going on that, wasn't there a forum that you watched about mental health for Black students or Black athletes?
Yeah, one of my teammates had a Zoom session for like a diversity kind of conversation that we could have and what we could help the NCAA do or Cal do to help bring diversity and help talk about inequalities on the campus life. So we did do that, and it was interesting to see the other sports teams go in and talk about their own experiences, because on certain teams at my school, there are less Black people. I'm on the volleyball team, and sometimes volleyball can be a predominantly white sport. So there's only 3 of us on there this year. And on the cross country team, there's only 1 Black girl. So it was kind of a different conversation to see that she's the only Black girl on her team, we're the only Black girls on our team. And then we talk about it. It was like I had no clue that there was only 1 Black girl on the cross country team, and I'm sure she didn't think there was only 3 on the volleyball team. So it was, yeah, it was a conversation, an interesting one.
Okay, awesome. Well, let's begin to close this out. What final thoughts would each of you like to leave with the people who are watching this discussion? Your young voices, young women that I'm very proud of, young ladies that I'm very proud of. And you are, you know, we're developing your leadership skills and experiences. So let's start with, if there are young people like yourself watching this video, what's a closing word or closing thought that you would want to leave with them? And then I'm going to have you answer it the second time for older people like myself. What do you want us to know about you? But let's start with other people your age, other young people. Taylor, what would you want to, what thought would you like to leave with some young people?
I think it's that I think I want them to learn that nothing can dictate who you are and what you want to be in life. And then also just to stay true to yourself and speak up for what you believe in and do what you can.
All right, all right. How about you, Keandria?
I would say you can never have enough education about it. So to educate yourself, and also that you can plan in your future, you can plan to be something out of the box. Like a lot of times you see the Black youth say like, oh, I want to be an athlete, I want to be this. And if you tell them, well, did you think you could be the president? Did you think you could be some like a boss, a CEO? They're like, no, I had no clue. So like, that's out of the box for my culture. So like, think outside the box, and like, you can be anything you want to be.
Great, great. And so the reality is we also have to give those young people more exposure because there's a lot of Black bosses out there and a lot of Black women and men who are doing it. So we have to also give those in those communities who haven't heard as much, give them some more exposure. Awesome. Kristen, what about you? What would you say to other young people watching this video?
Yeah, I would say just continue to learn. I think something that I've really taken away from this movement and my experience writing on the blog is some things that I was experiencing. I didn't know that there were terms for it. I didn't know, that others were experiencing that. And I think once you recognize that, then you start to feel more secure, and you start to feel like, really for a minute there, you might think that things are your fault, things that you may be experiencing. And so you have some confirmation that, this isn't all in your head. So I think the more education that you get, the better off you'll be.
That's awesome, because sometimes when you face racist stuff or even sexist stuff, you're like, okay, is this my imagination? Is this me? And I appreciated you wrote and said, this confirms things I've experienced, and I thought I was just the only one. So very
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to close with one final round, and we'll start with you, Kristen, and go the opposite direction. For older people like myself, what do you need from us? What do you need from us to continue giving you the voice, helping you to do what you've been created to do? So each of you think about that for a moment. What do you need from people of the older generation who want to mentor you, sponsor you, help you? So what is your ask of us? And I said Kristen, but I'll start with whoever wants to start on that.
Maybe sharing your experiences. So like what you guys were talking about, you thought you were the only one experiencing these things. So hearing it from someone you're close to, like better helps you want to change it. So just sharing your life stories with us, I guess.
Okay. Excellent. Anything else? What else would you want from us that we could be of help to you?
Yeah, I think one thing that Minda mentioned in her book is to always pass on the information that you know to the next Black woman. So I think, understanding when you do have those mentees, understanding what their goals are and helping to connect them to the right people might be helpful so that they can continue to advance their careers or to get further closer to their goals.
Okay, awesome, awesome. And Tay, how about you?
I think it's around the same lines as Keandra and Kristen, saying that I think just sharing your stories and your experiences will help. I think will help influence and give more reason to speak out.
Awesome, awesome. Well, ladies, young ladies, thank you so much for helping me close out this anti-racism series for JeannePorterKing.com. This is a wonderful time we live in the sense that we can make a difference and play a role in fighting racism and misogyny, sexism. But it's also sometimes a very painful time when we see some of the situations and we experience in ourselves. So this kind of forum of talking and sharing, and even as me, as your mentor and auntie, creating space for us to unpack these things is something we've got to continue to do. So again, thank you. And we look forward to the next time we have a conversation. God bless you.